Hi everyone, and welcome to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. My name is Jonathan Lamb with Tuts Plus, and I'm a game artist working in London. This is a course for artists and designers, both experienced and new to After Effects, helping you build a solid foundation in common workflows and breaking down complex animations into manageable chunks. Topics we cover will include using keyframes for animation, using effects and presets, and rendering. By the end of the course, you'll have a better understanding of these tools and how to create a dramatic, cinematic text animation for your projects. So sign in or sign up and let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll go through our initial setup and familiarize ourselves with the tools we'll be using throughout the course. If you're already familiar with using After Effects, you can simply skip to the next video now to get started on preparing your cinematic text animation. So we'll get started by loading up the same workspace as what we have here. And to do this, we can go to Window, Workspace, and Default. You'll also notice that we have some other options here to experiment with as well, but let's go ahead and stick with the default option for now. Cool. So now that we have our workspace loaded, let's go ahead and go into a quick introduction of what we're looking at here. So this workspace is made out of panels and frames. So these tabs here, such as Project, Effect and Controls, Composition, Info, Audio, etc. They're all called panels, and they're placed within these frames here. So Project and Effect Controls are placed within this frame here. Composition has this massive center frame here, and so on. So we can move these panels into different areas of the workspace by grabbing onto the panel here like so. So if I grabbed Preview here and clicked and dragged it along our workspace, you can see now that different areas of the workspace are highlighted. So if I clicked and dragged it back here, you'll see that it's in the same position here. And if I click and dragged it into the center frame here, you'll now notice that we've got two tabs inside our center frame. So we've moved Preview into the center frame here. So let's go ahead and move that back into its original position. You'll also see that we've got different drop zones. So if I move effects and presets around, so we moved it into the center here, which means that it appears inside the frame. But if we moved it to the side of the drop zone area here, you'll see now that we've moved it in between two frames, like so. Cool. So let's go ahead and place this panel back in its original place. And let's go ahead and go into what we're looking at here. So in the default workspace, you'll mainly be focused on four different areas. The left area will be the project panel here, and this is where you'll find all the resources of the project, such as imported files, logos, and texture files that you've created. The bottom area will be where all your layers are kept and where the timeline of the composition is. And the center area is where you can preview your animation video. And finally, we've got the right area here, which is where you'll find things such as the effects and presets, which we were moving around just now, and the preview option, which is what we'll be using in most of this course. Cool. So now that we're familiar with After Effects, let's take a look at the type of animation we'll be creating. On Envato Elements, you can find a wealth of videos and After Effects templates to download. There are lots of examples and variations of cinematic title animations. If you have an account with Elements, you can check them out. And here are some examples. So we have the particle trailer title here. So let's take a look at this. Very cool. And we have another example here, the cinematic trailer, which is very similar to the one that we'll be creating. And a last one here, the action trailer. So make sure you check them out if you have an account, and they'll give you some inspiration for creating your own version. In the next lesson, we'll make a start by creating the text for the cinematic title animation. See you all there! Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll get started with our cinematic video by creating our text animation. So now that we have After Effects ready, our workspace ready, let's go ahead and create a new project by going to File, New, and New Project. Next, we'll want to create a new composition. So go to Composition and New Composition, or Control-N on your keyboard. And this will bring up a new composition settings window here. So let's go ahead and change the name of our composition. So this is going to be named Main. And we can change the settings of our video here as well. So the size of our video, which will be 1920 by 1080. And you'll also want to change the frame rate, which will be 30 frames per second. And the final thing that you want to change is duration. So make sure that duration of the video is at 10 seconds. Excellent. So this will act as the main composition for our video, which is where all our main animations are going to be placed in. So click OK for that. And straight away, you'll find that our composition appears in the project panel here. And also you can view our composition in this preview window here as well. Excellent. So now that we've got this set up, the next thing that we want to do is we can bring in some external files into the project. So let's go ahead and import our texture file. So go to File and Import and File. Find out where your texture file is placed, select it, and then click on Import. And you'll see here that we've got our metal texture imported into our project here, like so. Excellent. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a composition for our text. So go to Composition, New Composition. And let's go ahead and name this one Title. And then make sure that the rest of the settings are exactly the same as what we had for our main composition. And then click OK. And now you'll notice here we've got two compositions in our project. And you'll notice here we've got them down here as well. So make sure that you're selecting the title composition. If the title composition isn't here, just simply double click on the title composition like so, and it will appear here. Cool. So let's go ahead and select the type tool and click on the preview window here like so. And now we can sort of create our cinematic title. So let's go ahead and type cinematic title like so. And here, let's go ahead and change some of the settings here. So just going to change the font. Excellent. And you can change the size of the font here as well. So you can make it smaller or bigger. So let's change it back to 175. Cool. And let's go ahead and change the tracking to 100. And here, let's go to paragraph settings and make sure that the text is centered. And this is because if we wanted to change the text later on, we wouldn't have to go ahead and mess about with the positioning of the text as well. We can just simply change the title to whatever we wanted. Okay, so now that we've got cinematic title set up, let's go ahead and use the selection tool. I'm going to go here to grid and guide options and select title action safe. And now we can use our selection tool here to sort of move it closer to the center of our composition. Now you'll notice here as I moved it, we can't actually see what's going on here, and that's because we've got the caps locks on our keyboard, which prevents the view from refreshing. So let's go ahead and press caps lock and it appears again. Cool. Excellent. Now that we've got this all set up, I'm just going to remove title action safe as it's a little bit distracting, and we can go ahead and create a simple animation for our title. So let's go ahead and open up the cinematic title here, select the little arrow here next to animate, and we're just going to click on tracking. And now you'll see some options appear down here as well. So make sure that our timeline is set to the very beginning, and we're going to make a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch icon here next to tracking type, in which will create a keyframe. And then we're going to move our timeline to about 4 seconds here, like so. And then we're going to change the tracking amount here to about 10. And once we've done that, press enter, and that will create another keyframe. So you can see as we scrub back and forth in our timeline, you'll see that we've got a nice little text animation. So it's moving, it's going from smaller to larger, like so. Cool. So let's go ahead and select both keyframes by clicking and dragging. You're going to right click on the keyframe, select Keyframe Assistant, and then select Easy Ease or F9 on the keyboard. And now we're going to go into the graph views, just going to polish up the animation a little bit. So let's make sure that both keyframes are selected. Go into the graph editor. And we can't really see anything here. So let's go to, right click, make sure that you're in edit speed graph mode. And then click on the fit all graphs to view button here, like so. So here we can polish up the timing of our animation. So let's go ahead and highlight this anchor here. And we're going to move this handle to the left a little bit, just holding Shift on the keyboard like so. Just moving it all the way to the end. So if we can't see the graph, just click on the fit all graph to view button as well. And then we're going to, just undo that, Control Z. And now we're going to move this handle just a little bit to the right, like so. Excellent. So now that we've done this, you can go to the preview button here. So just click on play, and you'll see now how our animation starts pretty quickly and then sort of slows down towards the end. Like so. Pretty cool. So that's a quick little text animation. In the next video, we'll learn how to add some texture to our text and also add some lighting and shadow effects. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to add texture, lighting, and shadow effects to the text. Now to add texture, let's create another composition and name it main title. So go to composition, new composition, and name it main title, like so. Click OK. And from here, we're going to drag the title composition into main title. And we're also going to drag the metal texture here as well. Cool. So make sure that the metal texture is below the main title. And if we zoom out here using the mouse wheel or using the drop down box here, we can actually go ahead and use the selection tool to resize the texture, like so. Cool. Now let's zoom back in. Excellent. So once you're happy with the size of the texture, let's go ahead and press F4 on your keyboard or click on the transfer controls pane. And you'll notice now that track matte option is here. So if it's without here, just click on that and the drop down menu for track matte will appear, making sure that your metal texture is selected. Go down to the track matte options and select alpha matte. And you'll notice now that the texture has been applied to our text. Excellent. So now that we have our basic animation all set up, let's go ahead and go into our main composition by clicking on the main tab here, or by double clicking on the main composition here, like so. Now, in order for us to be able to see some of the lighting effects for our text, we'll need a simple background. So to do this, go to Layer. In fact, make sure that main is selected. Go to Layer, New, and then select Solid. And now let's name this solid BG for background. And then click OK. And let's go ahead and drag our main title in here as well. Cool. So now if we scrub back and forth in our timeline, you'll notice we've got this cool little text animation with our texture included. Excellent. So make sure that the background layer is set at the bottom layer here, like so. And let's go ahead and create some color for it. Now to do this, let's go to Effect, go to Generate, and go to Gradient Ramp. And that will be added to our background layer, like so. Now for the settings, let's go ahead and put the start of the ramp from 960 to -250. And we can change the colors here as well. So let's change the color here. So the start color, I'm going to change it. If you have a specific color in mind, you can add the color number here, or you can just simply choose the colors here like so. So I'm going to change this to a pretty dark-ish blue, like so. And then we're going to change the end color to something dark. So I'm going to change this here. So let's go ahead and put the colors in, like so. Cool. So now we've got our gradient here. Let's change the ramp shape to radial. And I'm going to put the scatter all the way up just to remove the color banding here. So let's put the scatter to 500, like so. Cool. Now you can also move the ramp around by clicking and dragging this red circle here, like so. So let's go ahead and, oops, that's not it. So let's start with the ramp. Oh, here we go. So here's the red circle here. So let's go ahead and move this ramp up a little bit, like so. Cool. Excellent. So that's our background. If you want to adjust the background colors further, we can add a curve to this. So go to Effect, go to Color Correction, and then go to Curves, and you can sort of adjust the colors here, like so. Great. So now let's add some effects to the text. So select the main title composition, and let's go to Effect, and let's go to Perspective and Bevel Alpha. Now if we zoom in here, you'll notice that straight away that's added a sort of bevel effect onto our text, and we can adjust the settings of the bevel here as well. So let's change the edge thickness to 2.5, and we're going to put the light angle to 0. Keep the color at white, and let's put the light intensity to 1, like so. Cool. Now, if we click on the effects button here, you can see with and without the bevel alpha, just to see the subtle difference. Great. So now let's add a light sweep effect to the text. So let's go to Effect, Generate, and CC Light Sweep. And now let's go ahead and adjust the settings here. So let's collapse bevel alpha so we can see CC Light Sweep a little bit better. So the center is going to be 960 by 402. And the direction, we want it at 90 degrees. Shape, let's leave it at sharp. And let's keep the width at 50. Sweep intensity, let's put it at 30. Edge at 50. And edge thickness at 4. And we can also change the light color as well. So we can make it a slightly bluish color. So if you have a color number in mind, let's go ahead and put that in. So let's put that one in, light blue color, like so. And let's remove the caps lock, and let's put the light reception at add. Cool. Now if we zoom out, we can also use the selection tool here, and remember the red circle, we can actually change where the light is going to be placed on our text. So let's place it just a little bit above our text, like so. And again, just to see with and without the light, by clicking on the FX button, just to see the difference. Cool. Now feel free to experiment with these settings in order to find something which suits your project. So you don't actually have to keep with the exact settings that we have here. You can change the color, but this is what I'm going to use. Excellent. So once you're happy with the overall look of the text so far, it's time to create some shadows. Now to do this, we'll want to duplicate the main title layer by clicking on the main title. And let's go ahead and go to Edit and Duplicate, or Control D on the keyboard. Now let's rename this title, not by double clicking on that. Let's rename it, hitting Enter on the keyboard, and let's rename this Title Shadow. Cool. And now let's go ahead and delete these effects here. And let's go to Effect, Generate, and Fill. And we want to change the color to full black. So if we click on the eye icon on the main title here, you'll see this is the composition that we're working on. So now that it's filled full black, so again, click on the FX to see the difference. And now we'll just add a drop shadow to this. So go to Effect, Perspective, and Drop Shadow. And now again, we can play about with the settings of the drop shadow here. So let's put the opacity to 60%. I want to put the direction to, let's keep it at 135. Distance, let's change it to 20. And the softness, let's change that to 20 as well. In fact, let's bring that a little bit closer. Let's bring that to 10. Cool. And now you see we've got a nice little drop shadow for our text. Great. Now to finish up this lesson, let's set the project. So go back to the project panel here, and let's set the project to 32 bits per channel. Now to do this, hold the Alt button on your keyboard and click here. So it moves to 16 bits per channel and now to 32 bits per channel. So just keep Alt clicking on it until 32B PC appears, like so. So there we have it, some nice light and shadow effects added to our text. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to add some lighting effects to the background of our video. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to add and animate some lighting effects to the background. So first of all, let's create an adjustment layer above the text. To do this, let's go to Layer, New, and Adjustment Layer. And with the adjustment layer selected, press Enter on the keyboard, and let's change the name to BG Lights. Cool. Now with the adjustment layer selected, let's go ahead and add some lighting effects to it. So go to Effect, go to Perspective, let's go to CC Spotlight, and straight away they'll add a spotlight to the scene. And let's change some of the settings here. So let's change from to 930 and minus 500 here, like so. And let's go ahead and change the height to 100. And let's change the cone angle slightly. So something like that. Let's change it to something like 30. Or let's change it to 35. And let's change the edge softness to 100, like so. Cool. And the intensity, we can lower that down a little bit. So let's lower that to, let's lower that to about 35. Excellent. So now we can check that without. So that's that without the spotlight and with the spotlight. So you can see there's a subtle lighting difference here. Cool. Now let's add another lighting effect. So go to Effect, go to Generate, and let's select CC Light Rays. And let's go ahead and change some of the settings of the CC light rays here. So let's change the intensity. Let's bring that down to 50. Let's put the center value to 958 and 00. So it's at the top here, like so. And let's change the radius. Let's put the radius all the way up. Let's change that to, let's say 400. Warp softness, let's change that to 80. Keep the shape at round. And yeah, that's the rest of the settings are okay. As always, feel free to play about with the settings here, just to create a suitable look for the project or whatever project you're working on. And remember, we can always come back into these settings and change them again at a later date if we choose to. All right, so now that we've got our lighting set up, let's go ahead and animate the lights. So make sure that your timeline is set at 0. And let's put the light intensity of our CC rays at 0 as well. And then let's hit the keyframe button here to create a keyframe. So if we open up our BG lights and open up effects, we can see for our light rays, we've created a keyframe in our timeline here, like so. So let's move the timeline to about 2 seconds. And now let's increase the intensity to 40. and this will automatically create a new keyframe like so. Let's move this further along the timeline to 6 seconds. And now let's change the intensity and bring it back down to 0. So now we've got this sort of nice pulsing light effect for our animation. Excellent. Cool. So this is just a quick example of how to animate the brightness of the background light. So if we go ahead and click on the preview button here, you can see how that is all working together. Cool. So feel free to change these settings and to make the intensity brighter, for example. So if we move back down to 2 seconds, and if we decide that the animation is a little bit too subtle, we can change the brightness to something like, say, 60. Click on the preview button and see how that works for us. Cool. So you can see here that it's a little bit brighter than it was before. Maybe it's still a little bit too subtle for you, so we can change that to something like 75. Maybe that's a little bit too bright. Let's change to 65. You can see now that it brightens up and then calms back down again. Cool. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll start to learn how to create more atmosphere for our video, starting with how to create some lens flares and light streaks. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to create some custom light streaks and lens flares to our animation. So to do this, let's get started and create a new solid. So go to Layer, New and Solid. Let's rename this Lens Flare, like so. Make sure that the color is set to black and then click OK. So now that we've got a black solid in our scene here, the next thing that we want to do is to create a standard lens flare. So to do this, let's go to Effect, then go to Generate and Lens Flare. And this will bring a lens flare, a standard lens flare in the screen. And now we've got these adjustments here to play about with. So let's go ahead and change or experiment with the lens type. So I'm going to choose 105mm prime, as this seems to be the simplest looking lens flare that we have out of the three. So I just like the look of this one. So let's go ahead and choose 105mm prime and then increase the blend with original to about 75%. And then once we've done that, I'm going to use the selection tool here. I'm going to grab this red circular icon. And let's go ahead and bring it into the center. So click and drag and bring it as close to the center as possible, like so. And we can also check if everything is centralized to the screen by going down here to Title Action Safe. And you can see that everything is centered to the screen. Excellent. So now we want to change the color of the lens flare. So to do this, we need to go to Effect, Color Correction, and Curves, and then just play about with the channels to get the desired color that you want for your project. So I want a bluish looking effect, so I'll have to go ahead and bring down the red channel here, like so. And let's go ahead and bring the greens down as well. And you can see as I'm adjusting this, you can see how it affects the color of our lens flare. Then lastly, let's go ahead and bring the blue up a little bit, like so. Excellent. Now, once you're happy with the color, the next thing that we want to do is create a new solid. So let's go ahead and go to Layer, New and Solid. And this solid will act as the light streak. So let's rename this streak. And before we click OK, let's change the color to the color of the streak that we want. So make sure that it sort of matches the color of our lens flare. Then once you're happy with the color, click OK. And now from here, let's go ahead and select the rectangle tool and then create a thin rectangle as our lens flare streak, like so. So just clicking and dragging it across the screen. And once you've done that, we want to manipulate the shape of this rectangle to resemble a light streak. So to do this, let's go ahead and use the selection tool. We want to grab this top right vertex here and bring it all the way to the middle, like so. And then the same with the bottom left vertex, bring it all the way to the middle, like so. And now we're just going to adjust the right and left points just slightly so that everything is centralized, like so. So once you're happy with the shape, we need to enable transfer controls at the bottom here. So make sure that you've clicked on the transfer control pane. And now, once we've done that, in the drop-down menu for streaks, we want to change the mode to add, and this will sort of help blend everything together. Next, we want to make sure that the streak layer is still selected, and we want to press F on our keyboard for feather, and we can increase the mask feather to something that you like. So let's say 35% looks about right. And finally, we'll want to add some glow to this streak. So to do this, go to Effect, go to Stylize, and then select Glow. And here we can adjust the settings again. So let's adjust the glow threshold, bring it up to say 90%. It's a little bit hard to drag it, so let's input 90% here, like so. And then we can bring the glow radius up, something that you like, so maybe something like 100, like so. And we can bring the glow intensity up, so let's bring it up to 1.5. And from there, let's put the glow operation from add to screen, like so. Excellent. So once you're happy with that, we can actually bring the streak a little bit thinner, so you can still adjust the shape of the streak. And the lens flare is a little bit too dull, so let's go ahead and bring the blend to original up a little bit, like so. So let's bring it to, let's say, 55%. And there we have it. So now we've got a lens flare and a light streak. Awesome. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to animate these custom lights that we've just created. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to animate our custom lights. So now that we've got our custom lights created, let's go ahead and connect everything together and create some controls for our streak. So to do this, we need to create a new null object. So let's go to Layer, New, and Null Object to bring the null object into our scene. And then from there, select Streak, select both the null object and the streak, press P on the keyboard. Then from there, just selecting the streak, we're going to hold Alt on the keyboard and click on the position here. Then from there, we're going to grab the pick whip, click and drag it into the position of the null, like so. And then we're going to do the same with our lens flare. So select the lens flare, press P on the keyboard, hold Alt and then click on the stopwatch position on the lens flare like so, and then grab the expression pick whip again, and then click and drag it into the position of our null, like so. So now, once we select the null object, and if we use our selection tool, once we start moving around the null object, it will also move around our lights. Now you can see here we've got some edges as we haven't actually changed the blending mode for our streaks or our lights. Let's go ahead and Control Z that and select our lens flare. And underneath mode, let's change it from normal to lighten. And now we've added it back into our scene. Let's go ahead and select the null object. And there we go. We've got our streaks. So from there, I'm just going to change the edges of our streak just so that it doesn't have that sort of edge there. Excellent. So now that we've got our streak added into our scene, let's go ahead and change some more controls. So next we want to control the brightness of everything using the null object. So to do this, we need to select Effect and go to Expression Controls, and then select Slider Control, making sure that our null object has been selected so that it's applied into our null object. So you can see now we've got a slider control inside our null object. And now let's go ahead and call this brightness. So hit enter on the keyboard and let's change this slider control and rename it brightness. Excellent. Now let's go to our streak, press T for opacity, and now Alt click on the opacity like so, and we're going to grab the pick whip, and in fact let's bring the null object back here. So let's go ahead and grab the pick whip of the opacity of our streak and add it into our null object's slider like so. And you'll notice once we've done that, the streak sort of disappears like so. And that's because the brightness of the streak is now controlled by the null. So if we increase the brightness of the null, you'll notice our streak reappears again. Awesome. So let's bring the streak to about 80%. And with the lens flare, let's go ahead and do the same for this. So we need to alt click the flare brightness. So let's go ahead and select that. In fact, let's go ahead and open it up here and go to Effect, go to Lens Flare and select Flare Brightness. We're going to alt click Flare Brightness here. And let's click on the null object so that it comes back up here like so. And we're going to alt click the flare brightness here like so, and drag the pick whip. So if we select the null object again, grab the pick whip of our flare brightness for our lens flare all the way up into our slider. So now, if we play about with our slider here, you'll notice everything, the brightness of both the lens flare and the light streak is controlled by the slider. Excellent. So next we want to animate the lens flare. So let's go ahead and, first of all, let's go ahead and move the lens flare into the position that we want. So I'm just going to move it just to the side here, like so, just below the text and the center point for our scene. And now we're going to animate the lens flare. So let's go to the beginning of our timeline. Let's collapse everything here, just so that we don't get confused. Select the lens flare. and we want to animate the way that the lens flare is moving. So let's go ahead and open this up. And we want to keyframe the flare center. So let's go ahead and find the flare center and keyframe that by clicking on the stopwatch. And now move the timeline to about 5 seconds here, like so. And then we can change the flare center. So let's change this to 126 by 600. And you'll see the flare is subtly moving. Now, in fact, let's go ahead and change it a little bit more so it moves slightly more to the right, like so, just to give it a little bit more movement in our scene. In fact, that's a little bit too far down. That's it. Excellent. So if we scrub back and forth the timeline, you'll see that the lens flare is now moving. Now we want to create a flicker effect for our light. So in order to do this, we need to alt-click on the slider here. So let's alt-click on that and type in wiggle, open bracket, 1, 40, close bracket. And what this will do is it means that the brightness will wiggle by 40% every second. So if we drag the timeline here, you'll see how the brightness of our lens flare changes like so. So we can preview that to see what that looks like. Excellent. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll continue to add more atmosphere to our video by learning how to create and control particle effects. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to create, animate, and control some nice atmospheric particles to add some drama and movement into our project and scene. So to start off, let's create a new composition by going to Composition, New Composition, and let's rename this comp Particles. Make sure you're happy with the rest of the settings here, and then click OK. Next, we're going to create a new solid. So go to Layer, New, and select Solid. And we're also going to name this solid Particles. Then click OK. And now we're going to add some particles to the scene. So go to Effect, go to Simulation, and now go to CC Particle World. As we apply the particle world to the solid, you'll see that this sort of default firework style particle is appearing into our scene. So we're going to go ahead and change the look of this using the adjustment tools available inside CC Particle World. So the first thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to explore and open grids and guides here. So let's open that up. And I want to uncheck the horizon axis checkbox. So let's go ahead and uncheck these, as these are a little bit distracting. And I want to uncheck grid as well. Excellent. Next, we'll want to change the look of the particle. So to do this, let's go ahead and close grids and guides for now and open up the particle options here. And now we're going to change the particle type from line to faded sphere here, like so. And you'll see straight away that the particles have changed. So if I scrub the timeline forwards a little bit, you'll see the different types of particles. So you can actually experiment with the different types of particles here. But we're going to stay with the faded sphere here for now. And now we're going to change the color of our particle. So let's click on birth color here and change the color to whatever you want. So I'm going to go for a light blue color. So if you know the color code here, you can add that in. So the color code that I'm going to go for is 9ED3EF for a nice light blue color, like so. But you can choose whatever color that most suits the needs of your project. And now you can go ahead and choose the depth color as well. So I'm just going to choose another blue, like so. And next we can adjust things like the size of the particle. So in the birth size, let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to choose something like 0.15, just to make things a little bit smaller. And you can see now that we can't see any of the particles in our scene, and that's because that the refresh has been disabled. We need to press caps lock again to enable that. So now our particles are back in the scene. Excellent. And now we're going to go for the depth size. So I'm going to change the depth size to something small like 0.01, like so. And this will give us some nice small particles. Now we can set the length of time for how long our particles will stay on screen before they disappear. So if you want your particles to fill the screen a bit, we can make them last a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to do that, we need to put the longevity to something like 3.5. And that means that our particles will last a little bit longer before they die, or before they disappear. Excellent. Now we can also move our particles to cover the width of the screen. Now in order to do that, make sure you've got your selection tool and go over to the X icon here and just click and drag that across the whole width of our screen, like so. And also move this like so. Excellent. And we can also move the Z axis as well. Now in order to do that, we need to go over to producer. And if you know the positions that you want, you can actually input the values here. So let's go ahead and input some values. So I'm going to go with 0.14. And for here, I'm going to go with 0.23. And here, I'm going to go with 0.4. And we're just going to add a little bit of depth into our particle scene. 3, 2, 5. And finally, we're going to have 1.05, like so. Now I've just moved the whole particle scene down towards the bottom of our scene here, just so that it looks like the particles are going to be spawning upwards. So from the bottom of the screen to the top. And now if we grab the blue X here, we can actually move the particles around the scene to see where you want to place them, like so. Now you can see there's a little bit more depth to our particles as we move them around, which is pretty cool. Now, next we want the particles to have a little bit of physics to them. So in order to do that, let's close the producer and the particles and open up physics. So now that we've got the physics here, we want the particles. Now you can see here that the particles are sort of randomly moving from the background into the foreground, but we want them to move from the bottom of the scene, as we discussed, and float to the top. So in order to do that, we need to change the gravity to something like minus 0.01. Excellent. Let's just move this further down here a little bit. And you can see now that they're starting to float from the middle upwards, like so. Cool. Next, we want to change the way the particles move and animate. So let's go to the animation drop box here. And you can play about with these just to see what sort of animation you want. At the moment, they're sort of it's set to explosive, which means it's exploding from the middle, the X there, to outwards, like so. But we want something a little bit more subtle, so let's go with this one here. And now it's sort of floating upwards. Let's move this further down so you can see what I mean, like so. And now, because the particles are only just starting to give birth in the beginning of our timeline, we want the particles to fill the screen at the beginning. So in order to do that, let's drag the timeline further back, like so. And now you'll see that our animation starts with some particles at the beginning and continues to animate. Now, if you wanted particles to start from nothing like this, you can do so like that. But let's fill the screen with some particles first. Excellent. Now, another way to control the amount of particles on screen is the birth rate. So let's go ahead and change that here. So, not in particles, so in the birth rate, it's up here. So let's change the birth rate to something a little bit less, so 0.3. So now we have some nice floating particles. So it's a little bit more subtle than what it was before. Cool. Or if you wanted some more particles like what we had before, we can still increase the number to 1. But I'm going to leave it at 0.3 for now. Excellent. Now, another thing that's worth mentioning is the seed, which you can find under extras. So if you go to extras, you can randomize the seed, and this will basically change the way that our particles look in the scene. Cool. So now all that's left is to go over to the preview panel here and click on the play button, and hopefully you'll see some nice floating particles in your scene. Excellent. So that's it for this project. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to create some atmospheric smoke to our scene. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to create, animate, and control some nice atmospheric smoke to add some drama and movement into our project and scene. So let's begin by creating a new composition by going to Composition and New Composition, or Control N on the keyboard. And let's go ahead and rename this Smoke. Make sure you're happy with the rest of the settings here, and then click OK. Next, we want to create a new solid layer by going to Layer, New, and Solid. And let's rename this BG for background. And then make sure the color is set to black, and then click OK. Now we want to duplicate this background, so go to Edit, and go to Duplicate, or Control D on the keyboard. And now we're going to press Enter on the keyboard, and rename this fractal noise 1. Like so. Now with the fractal noise layer selected, go to Effect, go to Noise and Grain, and select Fractal Noise. And this will apply the fractal noise to our fractal noise layer. Now we can start creating our smoke by playing about with the fractal noise settings. So let's go ahead and set the contrast to something like 75, just to change the look and intensity of your smoke, so you can actually experiment with this, like so. So we're going to set this to 75. And now under Transform, you can scale it up or down to make the smoke appear larger or smaller, like so. And you can also untick uniform scaling. So if we bring that back to 100, untick uniform scaling, and you can change the width and the height separately now as well. So let's go ahead and change that. So we're going to set the width to 400, and let's set the height to something like 250, like so. Cool. Now let's set the evolution to 100, and this is how we're going to animate the clouds. So if we play about with the wheel here, like so, you can see how the clouds start to move, like so. So let's bring that back to 100. Now, in order to animate the loop, what we need to do is we need to Alt-click Evolution here. So hold Alt on the keyboard and click on the stopwatch here, like so. And now under here, we're going to change that to time times 150. Oops. Times 150. And this will give us a looping animation for our clouds. Cool. So now if we go to the preview panel here and click play, you'll see a preview of the subtle movement, like so. Excellent. Now, in order to animate the direction of the smoke, let's say if we wanted the movement to go from the left side of the screen to the right, we'll need to adjust and animate the offset turbulence. Now, let's go ahead. Now we can find the offset turbulence here. And what we need to do here is we need to create another continuous loop by holding Alt on the keyboard and clicking on the stopwatch again. And from here, we want to type in the following. So type in open square brackets, value, open square brackets, 0, close square brackets. And then we're going to put plus time times 100, value, open square brackets, 1, close square brackets, minus time times 20, close square brackets. And this will make our clouds move from left to right and subtly move to the top as well. So it gives a sense of that the smoke is traveling upwards as well. And we can click on the play button to see what that looks like. Excellent. Now, if we wanted the smoke to move even further up, we can change the value here to something bigger, like let's say 70. And now if we click on the play button here, you can see the smoke is traveling upwards in a more vertical direction, like so. But let's go ahead and keep it more subtle. So let's change that back to something like 30. So it looks like it's traveling a little bit that way. And we can also change the look and the amount of details our smoke has by playing with the complexity value. So let's go ahead and find the complexity value, which is here. And let's change that from 6 to something like 20. So you can see if we move the complexity like so, we can change some details of our smoke. So let's change that back to 20. Now what we can do is we can add some opacity to our smoke just to make it a little bit transparent. So let's go ahead and close the effects here. With fractal noise selected, press T for opacity, and let's bring this down to something like 20%. And this will make our smoke appear lighter and more transparent. Now, if we wanted to add some shape to our smoke, we can also create a mask by right-clicking on the layer, selecting Mask, and selecting New Mask. And now we can change the way that our smoke looks. So let's go ahead and move these vertices using our selection tool. I'm just going to make it out that the smoke is traveling from the bottom left of our scene to the top right, like so. Now by doing that, you'll see that our smoke now has this really harsh, sharp edge. So in order to smooth that out, let's go ahead and press F to create a feather and increase the feather like so, something like 500. And we can increase the bottom here like so. Excellent. Now all that's left is to preview our smoke by clicking on the preview button. You can see now we have a nice subtle smoke effect which is traveling from the bottom left of the screen to the top right. Excellent. So there we have it, how to create some nice atmospheric smoke for our scene. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to create some final touches by creating a quick zoom animation. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll add some final touches to the scene and learn how to create a quick zoom animation. So let's start off by bringing everything together into one final composition. So let's create a new composition and rename this Final Animation, like so. Click OK. And now let's add our main composition by clicking and dragging this into here. And now you'll see we've got our main animation, our main text animation in our final composition. And let's add the particles. So the particle comp in here as well. So you'll see the particles are now working together with our main animation. And then finally, our smoke animation. Now you'll see here as we added the smoke comp, it's just a black screen, and that's because if we head back into our smoke composition here, we've got the black background still checked. So let's uncheck the black background, go back into our final animation, and now you'll see as we scrub back and forth in our timeline, everything is working nicely together. Cool. So let's preview that. You'll see how the smoke and the particles and our text are all animating. Excellent. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to move our main animation forward in the timeline by 15 frames so that the zoom animation doesn't start right away. So let's go ahead and zoom into our timeline. And let's move our timeline to 15 frames. Let's highlight all of our compositions here and move them forwards by 15 frames. And this will give us 15 frames worth of breathing space for our final animation before the zoom begins. Excellent. Now to create the zoom, next we want to create a adjustment layer. So let's go to Layer, New, and choose adjustment layer. And let's rename this layer Zoom. And we want to parent all of these compositions to the Zoom layer. So let's go ahead and parent this and drag the pick whip to the Zoom layer here. And now let's go to transform and let's change the scale. So this is how we're going to animate the zoom. So let's change the scale here to about a value of 300. So change that to 300. And from there, let's move the timeline to about, let's say 22 frames. And in fact, we forgot to create a keyframe. So let's create a keyframe from the scale here. Move the timeline to 22 frames. And now let's put the scale back to its original value of 100 to create a new keyframe here. So now you can see that we are zooming. We've got this sort of zoom animation here, like so. Cool. So let's highlight both keyframes. Right click, go to Keyframe Assistant and select Easy Ease. And now with both keyframes still highlighted, go to the graph editor and let's select Fit Graph to View. And we want to edit in Speed Graph. And we want to edit the time of the graph. So let's go ahead and adjust the handles like what we did before. So let's adjust it here, like so. And this will just add a little bit more polish to the timing of our zoom animation. Excellent. Now we can add some more adjustments to our animation. So we want to add, lastly, CC lens. So to do this, let's create another adjustment layer. And let's rename this CC lens. Cool. Now go to Effect, Distort, and select CC lens. And you'll see now that it's added this CC lens effect to our adjustment layer. So again, let's go back to our timeline and move this back to 15 frames. And we want to set the size of our CC lens to something that looks like this. So let's adjust it to something like 230, like so. And now let's move the timeline forwards to, let's say, something like here. And let's put the size value to 500, like so. So you'll see now we've got this sort of subtle lens animation for our video. So this will give us a subtle distortion for our animation. So there we have it, a simple zoom animation. So let's go ahead and play this. Excellent. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to change the text. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to change the text of our animation. So now that we have our video completed and you're happy with the way it looks, what happens if you now decide that you wanted to change the text? Do you have to start from the beginning again? Well, not necessarily. Now this is why we've given the text its own composition. So if we double click on the title composition here, we can now change the text to whatever we wanted. So if we wanted to change cinematic title to something like animation, we could do that. And if we head back to our final animation comp, you'll notice that the text has changed and the animation still stays the same. So let's go back to our preview and play, you'll see that our animation is still there. You can also change the font family in here as well, and also the size of the text and the spacing, etc. And if you have an image file, you can also use this composition here to replace the text as well. All you have to do is simply drag your imported file into the composition and hide the text if you need. Great. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll learn how to render your animation. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to how to create a cinematic text animation in After Effects. In this lesson, we'll learn how to render our completed animation. So make sure the correct composition is selected. In this case, our final animation is inside this composition here, final animation. So go ahead and close the rest of the comps here. Now let's go to composition and then add to render queue. Here you can make some adjustments to the render. Just simply click on best settings here, and you can change the settings like the resolution or just to create a different size than the original video that we created in our composition. For now, we'll just keep it at the original resolution of 1920 by 1080. The next thing you want to do is click on lossless. And here you can change the format of the video. So you can see that we've got different formats here to change it into. So simply select the format that you want and then click OK. Excellent. Now you want to select the output of your video. So let's click on that. And you can select where you want your animation to be rendered. Click on Save. And now, once you've done that, all that's left to do here is to click on the render button and wait for the final render to finish. So that's it for this tutorial. In the next lesson, we'll go through the conclusion of the course. See you all there. So with that, we've come to the end of the Create a Cinematic Text Animation in After Effects course. Now that you understand the basics of how to create a cinematic intro, you can experiment with different intro animations of your own, such as using different color combinations, different lights, and different text. I hope you've learned a lot in this demo and that you can apply these skills to your own workflows. I hope you've learned some new things in After Effects that you haven't been able to use before and that you can use them to create your own future animations and designs. I had a lot of fun creating this course, so thanks for watching, good luck creating your own cinematic text animations, and I'll see you next time on Tuts Plus.